Hello everyone. I am very glad that you are on my channel. This is the InStyle Knitting Studio. My name is Julia. Today, I suggest you knit a hat with English ribbing and braids. It can be knitted with a fold, as in my case, or simply without a fold. You can wear it with a pom-pom, or without one. But this season, braids remain trendy, ribbing does too. Therefore, there is nothing better than the combination of English ribbing and braids. If you want to knit a hat with the familiar English ribbing with yarn overs, then here is a link to my other hat. Here, I will show a slightly unconventional 1x1 ribbing and a somewhat unconventional English ribbing. I knitted this hat for a head circumference of 54 to 55 centimeters. The height of the hat is 22 to 23 centimeters. So if you liked it, let's get started. I will use white leopard yarn. This has 100 grams at 180 meters, 30% mohair, 60% Australian cashmere, and 10% acrylic. If you like my color, here is the color number. I will also need knitting needle size 3.5 and 4.5, circular ones with a short cable. My cable is about 40 centimeters long, including the needles. I will also need a needle to temporarily transfer stitches when we knit the braids. Alternatively, you can use a large safety pin instead of that needle. Scissors, I have a needle, let's move to the end. A hook may be needed at the end of the knitting to hide the ends. A measuring tape, a notebook with a pen for calculations, and a calculator. A row counter like this might be needed. It is not obligatory, and a marker to indicate the beginning of the row. First, we will knit samples. Our hat will consist of 2 patterns. At first, we will knit 1x1 ribbing. Then we will transition to the English ribbing interlacing. We measure how many stitches we have in one repeat. We are calculating the knitting gauge. If someone is new to this and doesn't understand it at all, here's a link to my lesson. I explain in detail there how to calculate your knitting gauge. I also determine how many stitches you need to cast on. I have done all the necessary calculations. I wrote it down in detail. And now I will tell you, so that you can easily calculate the number of stitches you need to cast on, based on your knitting gauge. I will be knitting for a head circumference of 54 centimeters. We have 2 samples. The first sample is a 1x1 ribbing, using 3.5mm needles. We knit with a smaller needle size. The second sample is an English ribbing, using 4.5mm needles. We knit with the larger needle size. Now, let's look at the 1x1 ribbing sample. I knitted a sample. I had 20 stitches. And I measured it with a measuring tape. It was 11 centimeters. We write X stitches per 1 centimeter. This means we find out how many stitches we have in 1 centimeter. We write stitches under stitches, and centimeters under centimeters. Using the method of proportions, we will calculate now. Where we have 2 known numbers diagonally, we multiply them. We multiply 20 by 1, and divide by one of the 2 numbers that we know. We divide by 11. This gives us 1.82. That means in 1 centimeter, there are this many stitches. Then, we take the head circumference of 54 centimeters, and multiply it by the resulting number. We get, I rounded it to 98 stitches. And we check that this number of stitches is even. If there were a ribbing 2x2, then this number would need to be a multiple of 4. Since we knit from the bottom up, we initially knit with a 1x1 ribbing. Here's our number of stitches. Next, we move on to the sample of English ribbing. I had 24 stitches I measured. That is about 13 centimeters. The same applies. We find how many stitches are in 1 centimeter. By the method of proportions, it is the same. We multiply 24 by 1 and divide by 13. Since of the 2 numbers here, we only know 13. We obtain 1 whole 85 stitches. Thus, in 1 centimeter, there are that many stitches, and we proceed the same way. In 54 centimeters of head circumference, we multiply by 1 whole 85 stitches. And I rounded it, resulting in 100 stitches. But the repeat of this pattern is 12 stitches. We take the number of stitches we received. We divide by the repeat of one pattern, which is 12. We get 8 whole 3 repeats. That is 8 whole repeats. We take this 8 whole repeats. We multiply by the number of stitches in one repeat, which is 12. We obtain 96 stitches. 96 stitches or 8 complete repeats. We will knit not 100 stitches but 96. We did this so that we have a whole number of repeats. So our pattern would be complete in the cap. 8 complete repeats. And we check that our number is 24. Initially, as I mentioned, we will knit one by one in ribbing. After the ribbing, we will switch to English ribbing. That is, after this number of stitches, we need to transition to a different number of stitches. Accordingly, we take 98 stitches minus 96. We get 2 stitches, that is, we will need to decrease 2 stitches in order to then knit in English ribbing. We take 98 stitches. The number of stitches that we initially cast on, we divide by the number of decreases by 2. We get this number. After that, we need to create a diagram. That is, we need to write down how to knit a row with decreases. Remember, we take this number that we obtained. 49, we subtract 2. Always subtract 2 and write down 47. Next, we write decrease, since we need to decrease here, right? And we repeat the required number of times. In my case, 2 times. And we should end up with 96 stitches. How to check? Look, 47 plus decrease, which is originally 2 stitches. 47 plus 2, 49. Multiply by 2, since we will repeat what we have in parentheses 2 times, resulting in 98 stitches. And if we add 1 stitch to the 47 stitches, taking 1 stitch for the decrease, as we are left with 1 stitch from 2 after the decrease. So, 47 plus 1 will be 48. 48 multiplied by 2 gives 96. This is how we can check if we have correctly created our diagram. 96. If you have a smaller number here than here, then perform this action. You will get a negative number here. This means that you will need to make increases here. We perform the same action. And now from the obtained number, we do not subtract 2, as in my case. Just write the resulting number right here, of course, without the minus sign. Then write increase and repeat the required number of times. Write down here as many increases as you have made. This is the formula you should end up with. Then for each increase you count it as 1. You add, for example, 49 plus 1 times 2. So your increase means adding 1 stitch. I hope everything is clear to you. If not, ask questions in the comments. We take a size 3.5 needle to knit the ribbing one by one, and will cast on 98 stitches to knit in the round. I will cast on using 1 needle in a universal way. If someone doesn't know how to do this cast on, here's a link above, just follow it. And by the way, all the necessary lessons to help you with knitting this particular hat will be in the links below the video. So, I am casting on 98 stitches plus 1 stitch to join the knitting in the round. I have cast on 99 stitches. Now we will join the knitting in the round, and thus reduce 1 stitch. I should end up with 98 stitches as we calculated. With the right needle, pick up the first stitch we cast on to the right needle. Then, with the left needle, pick up the last stitch we cast on. Place it over the one you transferred to the right needle. Pull the yarns tight. I believe you know how to do this by now. Everyone has shown it. So, we have made a decrease. Now return this stitch to the left needle. And also be careful that the braid we have inside while casting on doesn't get twisted when we make this connection. Our hat will have a fold, so if you want this braid to be visible, you will need to turn your knitting. Knit in the opposite direction right here. Then, in this case, this braid from the initial cast on will be visible when we make the fold in the hat. If you want it not to be visible, then don't turn your knitting. I want her to be visible after all, that's why I will turn the knitting. Now let's start knitting the first row. Here, we immediately place a marker to indicate the beginning of the round. Now, we will knit one by one in a rib pattern. That is one knit stitch. Then one purl stitch, and we will repeat this. And we know that in circular knitting, knit stitches are always worked through the front loop. But I will work a bit of a non-standard rib. So here, everything will be a bit different. That is, look, I inserted the needle into the stitch. That is, through the front loop, and I knit the knit stitch like this. I bring the yarn over the needle and pull it through the stitch. This is how we knit the knit stitch. The purl stitch is always knitted through the back loop. It will be a bit tricky to knit in this row. It will be easier further on. We knit the knit stitch through the front, bringing the yarn over in this way. We knit the purl stitch through the back, like you would for a grandmother's method, just through the back loop. We will continue this until the end of the row. We have finished this row, and now we knit the second row. Here, we knit almost the same way, only our knit stitches will be worked through the back loop. Here we have a knit stitch. We insert the needle into it from right to left, and through the back loop, also placing the yarn over the right needle. We also knit the knit stitch this way. The purl stitch is knitted exactly the same way as in the previous row, through the back loop. Here we knit the knit stitch in this way through the back loop. The purl stitch is also through the back loop, like a grandmother stitch. It is already easier here. Here the knit and purl stitches are visible. Just like the second row, we will knit all subsequent rows. 98 stitches in each. For convenience you can use a row counter. We knit quite a few rows, as we have a hat with a cuff, but that's all. I have finished knitting. I had 98 stitches in each row. I knitted 38 rows or 14 centimeters. Now we will switch to English ribbing and also change to 4.5 needles. That is, we are increasing the needle size. But before we switch to English ribbing, we need to get this number of stitches, which we calculated. That means we need to decrease 2 stitches. We have already made a diagram, and according to this diagram, I will now make the decrease. Here I have 1 purl stitch left from the previous row. We will set the marker aside for now, and will hang it a bit later. So, next, we will knit with knit stitches, and will take larger needles. I am using 4.5, and we will knit stitches through the back loop in my case. We knit 47 knit stitches. Next, we have a decrease. Decrease in any way that is convenient for you. I have a purl stitch, then a knit stitch. I move them to the other side. That is, the other side facing me. And I knit 2 stitches together as a knit stitch through the front loop. After that, we again knit 47 knit stitches. We knitted 47 stitches. Now again a decrease. Here I have a knit and a purl stitch. I am not turning them this time. I just knit them together as a knit stitch through the back loop. Thinner needles, that is, we are now removing 3.5. Next, we will knit with 4.5 needles. On the needles, we should have 96 stitches. Here, we can place a marker. Let's begin knitting the English ribbing. We knit the first row. We will knit the knit stitch into the stitch of the previous row. Not through the upper half stitch as usual, but we insert the right needle into the stitch below here and knit it. We purl as usual, purl stitch, here is the knit stitch. We insert the needle below and knit it. Purl through the upper wall, purl stitch. So, we continue to the end of the row. So, we reach the end of the row. We slide the marker, we knit the second row. Here, we will knit the knit stitches as usual through the front wall, knit stitch. And we will knit the purl stitches through the lower stitches, purl stitches. Knit stitch through the front, as usual. Purl now through the lower row. Here, we insert the needle. Here, we have the intertwining of 2 threads. We grab the working yarn and knit the purl. So, we knit to the end of the row. We need to knit 10 rows. I have knitted 2 rows. Now I need to knit 8 more rows, alternating the first and second rows. If you are knitting not in the round but in flat rows, then you will knit all rows just like the first row. Only the knit stitches will be picked up from the lower row, and the purls will always be knitted as usual. Now we will knit the third row just like the first. Knit the stitch from the lower row, and the purl here will be knitted through the back wall, purl stitch. We have finished the third row. In the fourth row, it is the opposite already. We knit the knit stitches as usual through the front wall, and we knit the purl stitches through the lower row, from the stitch of the lower row as purl. That's it. We repeat, alternating these 2 rows until we knit 10 rows. We have knitted 10 rows. It turns out in odd rows, we knit the knit stitch into the stitch of the previous row. And in even rows, we knit the purl stitch into the stitch of the previous row. Now we will knit the 11th row. We move the marker, and in this row we will make a crossing of stitches. The first 6 stitches we will now place on a holder and leave in front of the work. Then we knit the next 6 stitches as usual, in English rib. We are on row 11. It is an odd row. So, we knit the knit stitches into the previous row. Here we knit the knit stitch into the lower stitch. The purl stitch, as usual, we knit into the back wall. The knit stitch into the lower stitch. We have already 3 stitches, 4, 5, 6. We have knitted 6 stitches. In English rib, and then we need to knit these 6 stitches from the holder also in English rib. You can knit directly from this holder. You can also transfer these stitches to the left needle. We have the knit stitch on this holder. Therefore, we knit into the lower stitch. This row is a bit tricky. And we will knit it like this. 1 purl stitch we knit as usual, into the back wall. 2 knit into the lower stitch. 3 purl into the back wall. 4, it goes again. Knit into the lower stitch as a knit stitch. And the purl stitch into the back wall as a purl stitch. That's it, we have knitted. The stitches from the holder, and now we will knit 12 stitches in English rib. Then we will repeat the same as we knitted from the beginning of the row. We have finished knitting the 11th row. We should have 4 such repetitions. That is, 4 of these pockets. That is why I initially said that the number of stitches should be a multiple of 24. Since this pattern specifically requires an even division by 24. After our crossing, we knit another 10 rows of English ribbing. Now I'll show you how to start this row. The marker has been moved. So, we are knitting the 12th row. Here we have a knit stitch. The 12th row is even. In even rows we knit the purl stitch through the back loop. Thus, we knit the knit stitch as usual through the front. And the purl stitch we knit a little lower. In this row, everything will go smoothly, since the previous row had a crossing. But, overall, the principle is clear. This is the first row. We need to knit 10 rows, and in the 22nd row, we will meet again. There we will also do a crossing, but a little differently. Well, I have finished knitting. Now I need to knit the 22nd row. We move the marker. And at the beginning of the row, we knit 12 stitches of English ribbing, just as we always knitted English ribbing before. The 22nd row is an even row. Therefore, we will knit the purl stitch into the lower row stitch. We have knitted the knit stitch, the purl stitch, into the stitch of the lower row, knit, as usual, through the front loop. Thus, we knit 12 stitches. 32nd row also goes with crossings, just a little differently. Therefore, we take an additional needle. After 12 stitches, the next 6 are moved to the additional needle, and left behind the work after that, we knit. The next 6 stitches in English ribbing have been knitted. Next, we knit these stitches from the additional needle, also in English ribbing. You can move them to the left needle. You can start knitting with the additional one. Here, our last stitch was a purl stitch. On your additional needle, the first stitch should be a knit stitch. We knit the knit stitch as usual. The purl stitch is knit into the stitch of the lower row. We are done knitting. Now we will repeat this until the end of the row. That is, we will repeat this piece we have knitted 3 more times, so that in total, we have 4 such repetitions. We finished the 22nd row. And we should still have 96 stitches on the needles. Next, we will knit straight in English ribbing. And the first row that we will knit will be counted as the first. Then in the 12th row, we will make a crossing just like we did in the 11th row. Then we will knit 11 rows straight in English ribbing again. We will make a crossing like in the 22nd row. That is, we need to alternate crossings as they go in a checkerboard pattern. That's it. This is how we will continue to knit in English ribbing straight, making crossings every 12th row, alternating them. And then we'll meet at the point when it will be time to decrease and close the crown. Well, I knitted in English ribbing 14 to 15 centimeters or 35 rows. It turns out I had 2 such repetitions with crossings, and 11 rows straight. The total length of the hat came to 28 to 9 centimeters. This part is 14 to 15 centimeters. And now it turns out I will knit 36 rows in English ribbing. And we will start our decreases. For the decreases we leave about 1.5 centimeters. There we will have 3 or 4 rows. So keep in mind that the height of the fabric will increase by 1 to 1.5 centimeters. Let's start our decreases. Here we have a knit stitch followed by a purl stitch. We turn the knit stitch so that the legs change places. And we knit 2 stitches together, the knit and the purl stitch. It is convenient to knit the front loop for the back wall. Next, we turn the front loop again, and knit 2 loops together as a front stitch through the back wall. After this, we will have half as many stitches on the needles. We knit to the end of the row. We have finished. Now in the next row, we knit the usual front stitches through the front wall. I had 96 stitches. And now I have 48 on the needles. In this row, I will also have 48 stitches. We knit the row to the end. you can knit not just one row, but two. Then the crown will be more elongated. The next row will consist of decreases. That is, we knit 2 front stitches together through the front wall as a front stitch. I believe this will be the last decrease row. Therefore, I knit this row loosely, meaning I leave the stitches on the needle quite loosely, so that it is easier to pull the cap later. 2 stitches together as a front stitch through the front wall. We continue this way to the end of the row, and it may be a bit uncomfortable, since there are few stitches, and the cord will be a bit long. Finished knitting. I have 24 stitches on the needles, and I will try to pull them together now. I believe it will work, and there won't be any gaps inside. But if you have more stitches or it does not pull together well, you can knit 1 more row just like the last one. That is, knit 1 from 2 front stitches. Thus decrease again by half. But I have 24, so I will cut the yarn now. I will leave it not too long. The marker can now be removed. We thread the yarn into the needle. I have stepped back at the end. Here we see the yarn from the last stitch. Now, we insert the yarn into all the stitches we have on the needles and simultaneously drop them off. We no longer need the needles. That's it. We have moved all the stitches to the yarn, and now we just pull. Here we need to be careful not to pull the yarn too tightly, so it does not accidentally break, because that would be a disaster. All done. I have tightened it, and now, for added security, I will run a needle around to pull it tighter. I have tightened it. And we will hide the thread on the wrong side. This is the closure I managed to make, and our 3-dimensional hat is ready. The height of the hat turned out to be approximately 21 centimeters. At the top, you can attach a pom-pom if you wish. You can see how to make a fur pom-pom from the link above. That's all. Thank you for watching this video. I hope everything worked out for you. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments. And of course subscribe, because the next masterclass will be coming soon. We will be knitting with English ribbing with crossovers, so don't miss it. Hit the bell, and I really hope to see you in the next video. I wish everyone easy stitches and good moods. See you soon.